All right, very good. So I have, like I said, I'm gonna run really quickly through a presentation because what I want you to hear from is some of our fellows that are on the call, and give you time to ask questions, okay? So Megan Mitchell, I've been at Legatum Center at MIT for about 4 years, but I've spent going on 17 plus years probably in entrepreneurship education. Like I'm passionate about supporting entrepreneurs, and feel very fortunate to get to work with the entrepreneurs that I do in at the Legatum Center. So you're seeing my slides, right? Not my notes. Okay, cool. This is, I have to ask this a million times. All right, so here we are. There's my email address. You all are welcome to email me at any point. It's meganmit@mit.edu, which is as obnoxious as an email address as you could ever imagine, but that's okay. That's how you remember me. So the Legatum Center, just at a high level, it's founded on the belief that it's entrepreneurs and their market-driven solutions that are going to advance economic and social progress in the world. All of us on the team believe that yes, development aid is important, but it should be episodic, right? The money that the World Bank and the USAID gives, that's episodic. It's really entrepreneurs like yourselves that are going to drive prosperity, and be the real change agents that are going to move us forward globally. You can call yourself social entrepreneurs, or you're just entrepreneurs, but this is what to us is really important. It's about building scalable, sustainable solutions to the world's biggest problems. I don't think it's unfamiliar. Like I think I would hope everyone on this call would agree. We'd all like to see a world where access to education is universal, financial services, everyone has access to clean sanitation, and there's enough jobs, right, to do like good jobs for people. But this is the global reality, okay? 500 million jobs are needed, and this number probably has changed even with COVID, right? Because there's so many new entrants to the labor markets between now and 2030. 2.5 billion people don't have access to basic sanitation, toilets, latrines. And we have alumni, and I can tell you stories about this, and I have examples that I've pulled out of this and pushed to the end of the presentation. But this is what we're looking for and what our students and our fellows are working on, these types of big, messy, global challenges. Here's the good news. The world's improving. Again, we've hit a major snag, a major challenge with COVID, but if you look at where the world was in 1820, right? The number of people living in extreme poverty was higher than it is now, just in real numbers. And it's 7 times, the global population is 7 times what it was in 1820. So things are better. Things are getting better, and that's great. And, we don't want to live in this world where we think everything's, negative and terrible, but poverty, like prosperity is also multidimensional. Like a lot of people measure prosperity by economic numbers, but I think it's really important to think of it also in multiple levels. This is a report that one of our sister organizations puts out, the Legatum Group, which looks at prosperity, whether you agree with it or not, but through 3 different pillars that have different components in it. So, particularly at a business school, we think about economic quality, maybe the business environment, the economic well-being, but I think also incredibly important is social well-being, environment, health, education. And what about the institutional foundations in these markets, right? Like the systems that that you as entrepreneurs will work in, government, personal freedom, social capital, safety and security. These are all components that make for better societies, more prosperous societies. So, what we continue to find, whether you look at it through economic numbers or through like a prosperity index like Legatum does, is that prosperity is going up. That's great, but it's still uneven, right? It's still super uneven. And we work with entrepreneurs who are trying to balance that, and work in those markets that are uneven, or it's not the same. So as I mentioned, we think, it's market-driven solutions that are going to tackle the world's greatest challenges. Entrepreneurs build disruptive solutions. They contribute impact. They build sustainable models. Like this isn't a nonprofit that has to come back year over year and continue to raise funds. You're built like our entrepreneurs are building scalable, sustainable solutions that create good jobs and develop that system level change, right? I think if you're building a company for Silicon Valley, right, a Silicon Valley company, the best, most innovative app, it's adding a layer of efficiency to pretty efficient systems, right? I have some of the new brands and products that different companies have built, and they're great. I love my Allbirds sneakers and my, Burrow couch, but that's not like, is that really contributing to systems level change, or is it just something that's like makes my life a little bit nicer, right? So I think that's something that's really important to us in what our entrepreneurs are doing, what our alumni are doing. So the fellowship, which is I know why you guys are all here. There's multiple components. Let's start. I'm going to start with the education piece. We have classes, 4-credit classes for the Legatum Fellows, the special seminars, where we think about providing practical curriculum for you. One that starts to think about who, like over the course of the year, who are you as a leader? What is your mindset as an entrepreneurial leader? Moving into who are the entrepreneurs that you need to model yourself against and business models you can learn from. And then in the later part of the year, how do you operate in the systems you're trying to impact, right? Like you can have your intervention as an entrepreneur and this great technology or device or whatever you've created, but how do you really create impact and really drive change? And you have to understand the world you're working in, the system you're working in. Community, incredibly important to me. You look at my title, I have lecturer status. I've worked in entrepreneurship education. I think you all can learn as much from each other as you can learn from me or from other faculty members. I think there's opportunities for us to share knowledge with you, but we really work hard to create a community that can learn from one another, that can share best practices, share lessons learned, and entrepreneurship is hard. And how can you support one another in that up and down cycle that is what you have to deal with as an entrepreneur. And then the funding, which is probably why most of you logged on, but why I purposely left it last. We have tuition assistance and prototyping grants, and look, like that can help you graduate with less debt. If you're a PhD student, we've done interesting things like buying students out of teaching requirements so they can work on their ventures. Funding is important. I know that it's hard to graduate with any sort of debt and be an entrepreneur, let alone in some of the markets you're thinking about working in where the value of the dollar is different, right? But that's purposely put last here because it really, to me and to Julia and to Kevin and to Courtney, it's about that community that we build and the education we can give you. And so the funding, that kind of shiny thing, we purposely put last. Okay, so here's more details on the funding, up to $50,000 in tuition and stipend funding. In a world where we can travel, we have travel funding available, which is not in the moment. Education, and you can ask the current students about these, the current classes that we offer. When Sloan Innovation Period is in a normal space, like we've offered credit for that. We have mentors, we have entrepreneurs in residence, Legatum staff, like lots of people in our network that can help you from an educational perspective. Oh, sorry. And then cohorts, like social events, shared workspace. We have a beautiful workspace in the new I&E building. And we do a lot of peer-to-peer education. That's a huge part of particularly the spring class. This is just a quick intro to our 2021 fellows. You can see 60 to 40% male to female, not perfect 50-50, but pretty significant given what, the entrepreneurship space looks like. most of you here are from Sloan or have some affiliation to Sloan, but it's super important to us to build a cohort of students that aren't just Sloanies. We have 3 PhDs, 2 undergrads, a couple of students who are graduates in engineering, which unlocks a whole new level of dialogue and conversation and experience when you come together to work on your ventures, and different perspectives. So it's super important to me that we build a community that's somewhat more representative of MIT than just our Sloanies, who are wonderful. The Sloanies are wonderful. This just gives you some more information. You can find this on our website, but you can see representing from across the globe, across different programs, our current fellows. And then I know everyone wants to know, like, how do we think about selection? There's the individual, the money that we give you as a fellow goes to your tuition, right? This is an educational program. We think about you as the individual first and foremost. We don't invest in your company. So we think about this from a perspective of, what's your ability to execute, your commitment to being an entrepreneur in an emerging market. And then secondary, and you'll look at the application, you'll know, we think about the idea, we think about the impact you're thinking about. And that's societal, that's economic. There's, impact is multifaceted. And there's no perfect answer. I've been asked this a million times. How far along does my venture have to be? Where do I have to be? Everyone sits somewhere in this kind of intersection of these 3 areas. Okay. So there's no perfect, you have to have 30 customers or X number of revenue. That's not it. It's about you as an individual and what you can contribute to the cohort. This is pretty straightforward. Application deadline is March 12th. We will do an internal review as a team in late March, and then in early April, we actually reach out to our friends and family, so to speak. Most of those are alums who will give us another perspective on your application, often just to help us with the venture itself. We will do interviews in April. For those of you who are incoming or might be applicants to MIT or to Sloan, like, please apply. We work with admissions to keep things moving. And if you're still in the admissions pipeline, we will continue to consider you for the fellowship. Our goal is to make decisions, at least for those who are incoming students, by late April, so they can make, so before you have to make a decision to join Sloan. Given where things are this year, for the majority of the fellows, we'll probably decide in May. But the fellowship kicks off. It's a September to May timeline. So I think I could give you lots of good information about other fellows, alumni, all that stuff. But we have a couple fellows here. Chris, I know you have to jump at 5:30. So can you talk about a little bit quickly about what you're doing? Because it's more interesting than me talking. And then I'll lose up to you next.
Yeah, so my name is Chris. I'm a first-year Sloan student, and I am building a mobile banking solution for the unbanked population in broadly Latin America, but starting in Panama and serving migrant workers who send money back to their families in Venezuela and Colombia from Panama. So what this service allows is individuals who don't have a traditional bank account to convert their local currency directly into this digital US dollar and send, store, or receive it from their phones. And then I'm layering banking solutions on top of that.
What did you do before Sloan, Chris?
So I, right out of undergrad, co-founded a early gateway, and which ultimately pivoted into become a decentralized exchange down in Panama for the cryptocurrency space. And then I moved to San Francisco and co-founded a long short hedge fund that used some unique models and sentiment analysis tools and different things that we built to actively trade cryptocurrencies, and traded a portfolio. So pretty focused in the fintech space.
What's your advice to people who might be thinking about applying to the fellowship?
Let's see. I think that it's definitely if you're doing it just for the money, that's probably not a good thing, because it is a big commitment, and you do have to be pretty committed to both wanting to grow with the people who are involved, but also your venture and actually working on that, because the center provides all these different resources, and we're constantly talking about our different entrepreneurial ventures, and all the activities that we're doing in these class sessions or revolve around these ventures. So I think you have to be really committed if you're actually planning on doing this.
Yep. Other advice? Any other advice you'd have? Because, like I said, I know. And then we're gonna go to Luis, who's got another commitment too. So.
I don't think so. I think that the other thing is just navigating, school and working on a startup is definitely tricky, but can absolutely be done. So don't shy away from that.
It can totally be done. One of the things I mentioned, I've been working in entrepreneurship education for now. I have been saying 15. It's getting closer to 20 years. The beauty of Sloan as a MBA program is your core classes are one semester versus a full year, which gives you a whole lot of opportunity to create an academic program for yourself that really is geared towards building a company. The other thing Chris didn't talk about, he last summer was on the team running Delta V, which is the Martin Trust Center summer accelerator. So he's super well tapped in also to the broader MIT entrepreneurship ecosystem. I'm going to share that for you, Chris. So then I'm gonna go to Luis. Luis is a Sloan Fellow from Mexico, who's going to tell you, because I know there's some Sloan Fellows on here too. Luis, can you share a little bit about yourself, what you're working on?
Yes, thanks, Megan. First, I want to mention that my objective coming to MIT, coming from the corporate, been working some years in corporate roles, was to become entrepreneur, which is very different world than being in a corporate. So the perfect vehicle that I could get to become my dream of becoming entrepreneur was Legatum. So when I find that there's an opportunity to have a center that can help you and give you first alignment in your goal, and if you don't have all the expertise being an entrepreneur, so it was the best that had happened. So my venture is devoted to solve two problems that are very deep in Mexico. One is the employment, and a second, it's all the pollution that's in the country. So my venture is dedicated to have a manufacturing hub to make electric vehicles components. So right now it's a mega trend. A lot of vehicles are going from internal combustion engine to electric ones. So this change will be making a lot of changes in the manufacturing, and the automotive sector is very important in Mexico. So I'm developing a hub that can make this transition and also implement projects to have a cleaner cities in the country. So the program have helped me a lot in guidance. I have been getting a lot of guidance and a lot of speakers that have my similar situation or similar risks when you become entrepreneur. So all the learnings from speakers, from the coaches, and from the excellent team that we have of 23 fellows, gives you a lot of energy and impetus to make this happen. So my advice to everyone is to have, don't worry to have a very deep, clear business case, because it will be aligned at the end, or maybe modified but just to have the impetus to make this happen in your venture, and be realistic in your strengths and what you can do for make this goal that you have.
Awesome. So question, like we can open it up to questions. We were gonna, we can put you in small groups if you want, but I think given, I'm just kind of looking, I think we've covered, no other fellows are here right now. What can we tell you? You've got 4 of us from the Legatum Center, plus Luis, who's here for a couple more minutes. His classes go at all times right now. Or I'm just going to call
I have 5 minutes, so I can answer if anyone has a question.
Yeah. Yash, did you have a question? Yeah. You came off mute. I could tell.
Yeah. So I was actually just wondering, so when it comes to Legatum Center application, is there a specific domain in which Legatum specifically serves students, like maybe something into sustainability, or is there a particular field that Legatum generally prefers?
No.
And it's not specifically for something that has to be for a social cause.
So I think you have to think about impact, right? Like an impact to us has multi dimensions. It's social and it's economic. I think, when I talk to some of our alums, they'll say, don't call me a social entrepreneur, I'm an entrepreneur. Straight up. The markets that most of our alums work in, if they've chosen really big, difficult challenges, then they're going to have a social impact. It goes through the companies they're building, but they don't want to be classified as social entrepreneur just for the sake of being a social entrepreneur, right? They don't want that special classification. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So is it important to us that our fellows think about the system change that they're trying to make and that big audacious goal? Yes. Is it important that you're building a company that offers good jobs and is ethical? And yes, absolutely. But it doesn't have to be necessarily a company for the base of the pyramid. For example, like I firmly believe that a company that is suited to creating jobs for the, the middle class creates secondary and tertiary jobs, right? Like that all moves societies forward. So to a person, most of our fellows don't call themselves social entrepreneurs unless they need to, because it's a competition they're supposed to but that's like entrepreneurship shouldn't be just like classified in these markets as being social and a special classification. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And just to clarify again, so is it also like the venture that the applicant has to be in, does it have to be for the specific geographies, like specifically for the United States, or is it just agnostic to that?
At this point, most of the ventures people are working on are in emerging markets that would be OECD, like classified that way. But we have alums that are, have chosen, to be perfectly candid, they've chosen like a biomedical or health tech type of solution that they realize if I get it passed through FDA approval, it's going to be easier in another, like I can then implement it in another market. So we understanding that also can be kind of an interesting nuance if that, Okay, so we have some questions. Eric, I feel like I saw your hand first.
Actually, it was Willow's, but
that's all right.
Okay. My question is, what the applications evaluate mainly? Like, we are applying as a company or as an entrepreneur? Because I, for example, am involved in different initiatives in Brazil, and I wonder if I should show the different things, or I should focus on one business specifically.
Yep. I think the fellowship at the end of the day is about you as an individual. I think you need to be thoughtful and targeted on what you're applying with and for, because I've worked with a lot of entrepreneurs. I don't want you to be distracted or, have 15 things going on? Are you going to do one? Like, what are you most passionate about? And that's kind of how you should think about what you're applying with. But it is about you. We've taken applications from teams, but we evaluate the individual co-founders like as individuals, because it's about, you're in school to grow and learn as an entrepreneur and as a leader. So that's what's most important.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I don't have control over whose hands came up when, so I'm just gonna call on Theo. Where did you go? I lost you. There you are. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think.
Introduce yourself, like your program and what you're doing.
Oh yes, sure. Thanks. Yep, I'm Theo, and I'm actually a prospective applicants to the STM. I see Akshay and Ignacio, their background, and I'm actually applying to STM. And yeah, I have a question for Louise, and I want to know, Louise, since you've started the fellowship, I really want to understand the level of support that you have gotten from the alumni community, and maybe some resources at MIT, especially when you're going through some tough time with your idea, or when you're having some challenges on the ground, maybe as manufacturing, maybe as trying to get the project fits to meet deadlines, or trying to make your team work. Who do you call? Who do you run to as a mentor to help you to solve those challenges?
Yeah, it's a very good question, Theo. And I will give you a couple examples. Like I had an impact venture class last fall, and one of the assignments that I aligned my class with my venture was to understand the electromobility landscape. So if I want to jump in a venture of electromobility, I needed to have a very clear understanding of electromobility in the landscape, in the work, and also in MIT. So in my breakup rooms that we have in our group every Tuesday, I tell to the team, I need to find people that has connections with electromobility. So suddenly I got like 5-6 connections. I'm taking mobility venture class. I know this professor. No, this one, because you have people from Sloan, from PhDs, from engineering. So automatically you get connected with all the MIT ecosystem. So in that way, I could connect with a lot of professors, and actually I got some classes that I could take because they were related to my venture. So with this network that we have internally, we can expand to the ecosystem. And also we have monthly reviews with Megan and Julia, and sometimes you just need to say what is your venture going, and you get that, oh, why you don't do this, why you don't do that, and or a connection. And for example, I got two finance connections last December, which I'm tracking for my fundraising. So that's some of the examples. Like, and also, for example, next Tuesday I have a class, and we have like two students per class, which we have a breakup room with all that class, and you say, where are you in your venture, and what need or what help, what is your ask? Like, for example, next Tuesday I will ask the team, I'm in a very critical situation in my venture where I need to negotiate a specific topic. So just to have ideas from the group, it will help me to have very good negotiation skills that I will use in my venture. So as a summary, is a team effort. Everyone wants you to be successful, and gives you advice and recommendations but you have to be very assertive in what to ask, or what you will end up with nothing.
Thanks, Louise. That was helpful. Thanks.
Yeah, I think
Good.
Louise makes a good point there, that like we try and create conditions for you to succeed and to grow as entrepreneurs, but you have to take advantage of that also, right? Like the classes are set up so that the deliverables for the class are very much relevant to the venture you're building. The spring class really and truly is all about, like, we have speakers that come in, but then the second half of the class is Luis is going to share like what he's trying to do when he goes to negotiate the purchase of a large manufacturing facility in Mexico, and using his classmates to help him understand, like, or come up with creative ideas of negotiating points. So it's really about community learning and sharing. Let's go to Manuel.
I gotta go. Thank you, everyone, and good
Yeah,
luck
how are
in the
you, class,
process. Yeah, I'll see you. Thank you.
Thank you, Megan. So you were going through the selection considerations, the individual component, impact, and idea. Can you maybe dig a little bit into how the idea is like evaluated? I know it says like technology, innovation, and the venture stage. What does that mean?
Well, first I'm going to ask you, what's your story? Who are you? Like, what?
Oh yeah, of course. Sorry. Yeah. So I introduced myself at the very beginning. I'm Manuel from Colombia. I grew up there. I've been working in management consulting in Latin America. I lived in Chile, Colombia as well. And I'm a first year MBA. Right now I'm exploring some ideas in entrepreneurship. I have like this specific idea for helping medium to small businesses export their products, right? So I'm thinking that has a huge economic potential. This is just an idea at this point. So I'm really trying to see how that could fit into the application. If, of course, you've said that the stage of the idea doesn't matter, but how is the idea evaluated, like aside of the impact, which I know is a different component?
No, that's a fair question. I think, look, for those of you that are MBAs on this call or in this session, the expectation becomes like, you probably have identified the problem you're trying to solve, right? The solution that fits into that, you're not sure of yet. The technology that fits into that solution. It's a loose way of framing it. Now, if there are some PhDs on here, they might have built a super cool technology, right? We had a PhD student who had built a handheld device that could rapidly detect dengue, Zika, and malaria in the field for pennies on the dollar. You say, like, I tell you that and you say, oh yeah, absolutely, that has huge potential. But the market need wasn't, he hadn't figured out the market need, right? Like, so that's a very much MIT thing. Like, you have the engineers, you have the MBAs. So when we think about this, like, to be honest with you, I assume the idea, the solution you have right now probably isn't the solution that's going to be what you deliver. Like, let's be honest, like you have to start building to know that, and that's okay. That's part of the entrepreneurial process. That's the up and down of the entrepreneurial process. So I think thinking about it from the perspective more of the challenge, like what you're trying to solve, why you're passionate about that, why you understand that problem, who you've talked to, what your current solution is. Yes, like but I don't necessarily expect your current solution is perfect, if that makes sense.
Great, yeah.
It's too early.
No.
And actually, it sometimes bothers me, if I'll be perfectly candid, if someone says, no, this is it, this is the solution. I know I'm right. I'm right. You don't have to tell me. There's nothing for me to learn. I have the right solution. That's not, like, the other thing that's super important to us in the fellowship is like your willingness to learn and share and work with one another, because you actually get more from when you fail and in the learning process, particularly as an entrepreneur in the stage of the life that you guys are all in, right? Like, you have work experience, but you know, you don't, like, you're not going to figure it out exactly. So we're not looking for you to have the exact right solution. It's the way you think about the problem you're trying to solve. Does that?
Yeah, I get the point. Can I just ask another question? And it's more of a piece of advice. Maybe if you can share with us what you've seen applicants do wrong while like building an application. Is it because they don't convey enough impact? They don't demonstrate like ability to execute or commitment? What do you think are like the major flaws in applicants that don't make it?
Oh, I mean, there's a million things I could tell you. You need to be authentic in what you're trying to do. if I'm being perfectly candid, like if you actually look at the questions, it's one of the questions in the application is, are you committed to being an entrepreneur in an emerging market? And it's okay. And like literally it says in parentheses, it's okay if you say you're not sure. Like that's the bigger piece of this is who are you really? What do you really care about? What are you thinking about? Kevin said, he's been at the center 10 years. Julia's been at the center 7 years. I've been doing this 20 years, almost, like working with entrepreneurs. Like you can try and game the system and sometimes you might get us, but what we care about is like to see the passion about who you are and what you're trying to build and trying to do. We understand that might change. But that's what we're looking for. We have a whole set of values for the fellows: humility, inclusivity, collaboration. These are all like, that's so important in terms of who you are. And if you are pivoting and doing things differently, that's okay. We'll figure that out together. Particularly in this environment, right? How many students do we have that have thought they were doing something a year ago, and the world's very different right now than it was a year ago. So yeah. I'm going to move on. Let's see who, I'm just going to go how you guys are listed. Jose.
Yes, my question would be, how do actual students manage to start a new business plan and study for their MBA? I mean, I have this entrepreneur background and I literally gave up my social life and family. So I could not imagine myself starting a new business plan and starting an MBA.
So I think you have to be 100% committed to it. That might sound simple, but you will come into an MBA program and there'll be a lot of distractions, clubs you can join, conferences you can do, classes you can take. The more specific you are in what you want to achieve, the more likely you are to be able to do it. It's not easy. And I think first semester for any first year MBA is going to be hard because you have like so many things that you're supposed to be doing with the core and all that. But if you think very thoughtfully and deliberately about what you want to accomplish and achieve during an MBA program, it can be done. I've seen it done across multiple programs. But that means selecting classes that you're working on your venture in. Because guess what? Then you get free labor. Like you go into a class that's a team class. No one wants more than have someone who's got an actual project that they care about, that's going to be the natural team leader. And then you get free labor, free, very smart labor. You use the competitions, for example, as ways to give you targets to get something done, like to force. Competitions are great even as a forcing function of like, oh, it's a deadline. I need to do this for this competition. And it moves up on a priority list, right? Like, and forces you to work on your venture. There's amazing people and resources and like in ways you haven't even thought of. The library. This is like the most wonky, old-fashioned like resource you can use. There are librarians at the library. They're like master sleuths. Like you have access to research and data and they want to do this for you, right? Like research and, so you can do market research that you would never, you'd have to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars for the reports that these like amazing librarians will just pull up for you and find for you. So you have to be very thoughtful and deliberate. If you try and go into it splitting yourself in different ways, it won't work. And I've seen a lot of people do that and I understand why they do that. And I've spoken to students along the way. I'm like, go back to your application. If you were genuine in your application for school, go back to that. Remind yourself, because it can be hard. It can, you see people getting job offers and you see people taking roles, like everybody puts on their suit and does the on-campus interviewing, which isn't as bad, I don't think, at Sloan as it is at other business schools. You have to find your tribe that'll help you remember what you're being authentic to. So while it can seem overwhelming, like you can actually position it for yourself to make it work. Does that help? Does that make?
Yes, 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 of course.
It's not easy, but it's like you're giving yourself space to do what you want to do and craft this amazing experience for yourself. But you have to be thoughtful about it and like very determined and specific in what you're doing, which isn't always easy, but it will serve you well. And there's so many resources that you won't get. Like, this is free time. You come back to school and it's like, it's your time. If you think about it that way, right? Like, this is you giving yourself space to do something different. Yeah, Akshit, go ahead.
Thanks, Megan. I have a quick logistical question. So I saw that there's 18 credits of classes by Legatum. So how does that interplay with the degree program? So,
Yep.
For example, with SDM?
Yeah, the easy short answer is we work with you. It's kind of like you could get 18 credits, but I've had students that are like, I'm maxed out on credit. Can I take it as a listener? Yes. You still have to do everything for the class because we want this part of the community experience. But I'm not going to mess up your graduation requirements either, right? So we very much work with people on that, straight up. Yeah. Andrew.
Thank you, Megan. Yeah, so I popped up my question in the chat also, but I have a couple of questions, but my main question would be, do I need to present an MVP or particular startup business model or idea in the application, or can I also apply just showing my potential to fund or launch an impactful and successful venture?
Yes and yes. So look, the deadline is March 12th. We probably won't do interviews till probably close to 5-6 weeks later, right? Like, if you're a true entrepreneur, things are going to change between when you submit an application and like when we even interview you. So apply. If you don't have an MVP, it's okay. Like,
no, but I mean, do I need, like, in the application, is there a specific box asking like, what's your venture? What do you want to solve? What's the problem? Or is it like, what would you like to change, or what do you have in mind, or what kind of experience do you have as an entrepreneur?
There's actually both. Like, we start with you. We want to know about you. You're important to us. And that's what we lead with. Then it is, what's the problem you're trying to solve? And what is your current, basically what's your current solution for that? Like, where are you with it and things like that. But it's intentional that we start with the questions about the individual.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah, I'm asking because in my case, for example, just to talk about my background as well, I worked in consulting, and in the last year, I participated in the MIT COVID competition from Latin America, and I was one of the finalists, got sponsored by AWS and IBM on our idea, which was great, and it did evolve. We still work with IBM and AWS, but I'm not 100% sure that that's going to be the final idea or the final product. In fact, I think that MIT is going to offer a lot of opportunities for me to expand on that vision and maybe do another thing, you know? So I'm not sure about applying with that idea or just saying, you know, this is my potential, this is what I can do, and I'm sure I want to generate an impact.
Yeah, I would, in that instance, for better or worse, like, apply with what you're doing, but I think be open and candid. Like, again, you're coming to school, you're not supposed to have all the answers, right? Like, and I've had students that have moved, like, they've completely shifted from education to agriculture. It's not ideal. It's not exactly what I want, but I understand, like, we understand. It's about the commitment to, at the end of the day, I would say, the commitment to impact, right? And change.
Great. Also, sorry, I wanted to ask another question, if I might. So if someone does get selected, do they have the commitment to do not take an internship during the first year, summer? Is that a requirement or not?
It is not a requirement. Full disclosure, we typically ask what you're doing for the summer because we're curious. it's just a data point. It is not a, like, there's no right or wrong answer, if I'm being candid. You know, we have a fellow this year he's a 2-year fellow. He's been a fellow both years. He's from Kenya. He has an existing, I'm just making sure he's not even on here. He has a company in Nairobi that does solar installation. He spent last summer at Amazon in their sustainability initiative, right? Like, yeah, that makes sense. Like, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
Right? Like, yeah, maybe if you're telling me, so it's all a part of your journey and who you're trying to be to develop, right? Sometimes those points don't match up and then it's questionable, but you have to think about what you want to do for your growth and your development as the entrepreneur or individual you want to be. And so we don't, like I said, we don't have a yes or no answer to those things.
Right.
Because again, it's about you guys as individuals. So I'm not trying to be evasive. You
No,
have to.
I understand. I understand.
Yeah. Yeah. Yash.
Yeah, hey, sorry. So you mentioned that there would be definitely changes between the time you apply and by the time you have the interview. So I'm just wondering, about after you apply and if you do happen to get into the program, does Legatum have a deliverable of sorts that they expect at the end of that 1 year? Because I've been in the startup ecosystem for over 5 years now in India, and I know how many times I've had to pivot and how much damage it has done when I've not pivoted just because I'm stuck to an idea. So is it a requirement of sorts that has to be at the end? Oh, awesome.
No, in fact, nothing makes me crazier than if someone doesn't pivot when they need to pivot, right? Like, what you'll find is fellows come in at different stages of their ventures, different levels of maturity with what they're doing. Some are raising equity funding. Some are much earlier. But it's why we invest in your tuition, not in your venture also, right? Like, because you shouldn't be, you shouldn't be committed to something just because this is what you applied with. That's not the way the entrepreneurial journey works, right? So now, do we want to see progress? Yes, but progress is also learning, and that might mean pivoting. Like, I alluded to it earlier. Humility is one of the values that we bring, like we expect to see demonstrated by our fellows, and part of that humility is like expressing when you're failing. Like, this isn't working. I have to do something different. This isn't working and I'm learning. And so I'm pivoting, right? Like so no, we're not that kind of program where it's like, this is what you applied with and you have to stay with this and come hell or high water. That's not how we think about it, because that to me is not truly representative of the entrepreneurial journey. Straight up.
Thank you. That makes me feel so good about the program.
It's an educational program at the end of the day. It's not an accelerator program right? So Bob, it looks like our last question.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much, Megan. Yeah. So I'm actually an undergrad over at MIT, and so obviously this is a very heavily MBA skewed audience, but I was definitely curious to ask what kind of stands out in the undergrad applications you receive, and what would you suggest undergrads do in order to demonstrate their interests and impact?
So we have 2 undergrads this year that are fellows. It's the passion. It's about like what you're trying to build and what you care about, right? I'm going to tell these MBAs on the call, the undergrads are super smart. They're actually probably smarter than most of you. But also we love, like, you bring a different perspective to the cohort too. So it has more to do with you, again, being authentic to what you care about and what you want to change in the world. I understand your work experience is different than, someone who's coming in as a Sloan Fellow who's got 15 years of work experience. But there's also a level of passion and drive and that is super important too. So that's what I would say is how you demonstrate, like, it's what you care about, right? Like I've done this long enough to kind of balance for work experience versus passion and commitment. Yeah, I don't know. Does that, what are you working on, Bob?
Yeah, no. So I guess like one of my projects has mostly been focusing on like developing and implementing an SMS based triaging platform. Originally focused on COVID, but now as we shift more into sub-Saharan Africa, focused on other diseases also. So that's kind of been my main project, but obviously not sure how like what extent you'd expect undergrads to have both ideated and also implemented.
I'd be willing to tell you probably most of the MBAs on here haven't built something to solve their problem. They understand the problem. You've built something. Here's the thing. This is a super unique MIT thing. The engineers and the PhDs, the undergrads, the PhDs, like, you guys know how to build things, right? You need to think about the problem you're trying to solve. The MBAs understand the problem they're trying to solve. They don't know how to build the solution, right? So the more you can focus your mindset of like, okay, I can build this, but is there really a problem that I'm trying to solve, is super important. Like, that demonstrates that, like, that's what you care about. I mean, I had a conversation yesterday with a PhD student who was like, if I knew better, I would have started with the problem. I can build any technology I need. I should have found the problem first, right? And that's not easy to do. That's something you learn, you evolve with that. But I would say it becomes a matter of like just your passion for solving big, audacious problems versus thinking, you know what, I'm going to take my MIT degree and go work at Facebook or Tesla, or like, how do you want to apply like these incredible skills that you have to solve big, giant problems?
Great. Thank you so much. I appreciate that a lot.
Yeah. Anybody else? We're at 6:02. I can stay on. People want to jump off, no problem. And you want to share what they're doing? Yeah.
I do have another question, if you don't mind, Megan.
Mm-hmm.
So I was wondering, how do fellows keep benefiting from the Legatum Center after they graduate from MIT? For example, you start a startup, you need funding 2 years afterwards. Does Legatum connect you with the right people? Is there mentoring? How does that work?
Once you're a Legatum fellow, you're always part of the family, right? That said, no, we're not necessarily a pipeline for funding. But we have time and again brought alums back. Look, we're working on this, a more systematic alumni support program. There are alums we're closer to than others that we bring back on a regular basis. We bring back to campus, they speak in class, they benefit from meeting the current students. Maybe we place interns there. We write articles about them, give them visibility for what they're doing, all these different things. Something that's really fantastic, like about a little over a year ago, we had a new executive director came on. And while Julia and I are very much focused on the student programs, one of the things the center is doing more of is building more visibility for what the center is doing, right? And by being more out, like publicly facing on thought leadership and research and convening events and activities. I love it because it means the students and the alums are going to be recognized more. So there's that benefit. So, mentoring comes, there's not an official mentoring program for alums, but anything alums need, we do and work with them and help with, and connections and all that. But no, you'll find that across actually higher education. People ask like, well, what's the alumni support? It's like, well, wait, we only have resources to technically support the students. So, but
I mean, connecting students is a great support. Actually, I was surprised that I didn't find, a way to look for patents coming from MIT and search them, like a Crunchbase, for example, for MIT. That things like that are great, you know, because you can connect people from the undergraduates and Sloanies as well.
You know, I think one thing that's super valuable is, although it's mostly kind of Sloanies on this who joined, you know, you saw Yab was here as like an undergrad. We actually convene students from across MIT. Yes, the bigger number is Sloan students, but we have IDM students like Yash, we have SDM students, but we have PhDs and undergrads and, you know, engineering, media lab. And that's hugely valuable, right? When you're starting to try and break down problems that you're facing, to have, honest to God, to have an undergrad who's like, oh, I know how to get you that information, right? There was a really good example. We had this was 2 years ago, but you know, we had a student who was working in, I think, Uganda, but he was trying to build like an app. He's like, I don't have the data to build the algorithm for the farmers. It was like a chicken and egg. Can I build the algorithm? I don't have the data. If I have the data, I can build the algorithm. And literally there was a PhD student who from the media lab who was like, oh, Jesus, stop. I can write you the algorithm. I don't know how to talk to customers. Can you help me talk to customers? Because this is like a brilliant media lab PhD student who can write algorithms till the class, you know, and it blew the mind of this like MBA student who was like, oh, but that was his problem. He could talk to any customer he needed to, but this PhD was like, whoa, I can't talk to a customer. I can write you an algorithm. Like, give me 10 minutes, I'll write you an algorithm, which to me blows my mind because I'm not an MIT PhD student, right? But do you see what I was like? There's also this really interesting dynamic that starts to unfold when you bring these different communities together, all with a shared passion for driving change in markets and driving impact.
Was that connection made through Legatum though?
Yeah. We were literally sitting in class, and it was an MBA student who's now working at MasterCard who was like, his head was like, I don't know what to do. Super smart, super thoughtful. He's like, how do I build an algorithm without data? And like I said, the PhD student was like, oh my God, just tell me what you want the algorithm for. I can write that. Can you help me figure out how to talk to customers? Because these are like really cool things that like it gets outside of. It was a fun moment to watch, like literally this one. Julia, you know exactly the moment I'm talking about, right? And like Alejandro was like, oh my God, who cares about an algorithm? Like that's the easiest thing in the world. How do I talk to people? So
that's awesome. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
One last thing, like what are the timelines or the when do we actually hear back from Legatum about the process?
So the application deadline is March 12th. We will do interviews in April. Okay. We've pushed things out a little bit because the semester started later. We've pushed things out for people who are trying to make decisions about incoming students who are trying to make decisions. We're going to try. I can't guarantee. We're going to try and get decisions to those people before they have to decide to put down a deposit. But everything will be done before the end of the academic year. So people know that.